is it about, in broad strokes, about a medical office facility that makes sense besides parking?
I mean, they label themselves a nonprofit, which is a good gig, but we've seen them make billions and then also get public funding for their corporate office. So it's a pretty good gig if you can get it.
That's one of the things that makes America great. Welcome to another episode of Real Estate Anonymous. We've got Matt Lasky here who's going to help us preview a medical office building in Arlington, Virginia. 150,000 square foot building with some value add potential. I know we've never heard that story before. I hope you guys enjoy this episode, and we'll pick it up next week.
Welcome into another episode of Real Estate Anonymous, the podcast by dumb guys for dumb guys. Hot week this week. We're talking about medical office buildings, and we've got the pros pro, Matt Lasky, here with us. Matt, give the gang an introduction about you and what you're up to.
Yeah, so I guess full service real estate company. We started as a developer, have acquired a bunch, have been as a company doing medical office for over 30 years. So we'd say our core competencies are retail and healthcare. It used to be large retail prior to 2008. Now it's large healthcare and smaller strip centers. And we actually are under progress on a $250 million mixed use deal next to our main campus. But primarily kind of suburban medical office and have done a lot of value add, which is what I think we're going to talk about today. Kind of current portfolio is around 600 million with, call it, another 250 to 300 in progress. And this is all I've done for the last decade and a half.
Right on. Well, more importantly, we got Brett Moss in the eye of the hurricane right now.
Yes. Leave it up to the Florida man to really mess things up. And what's great about this week is all of our three kids are off of school, and I don't think it's going to rain much at all today here in Orlando. So this is Florida's equivalent of a snow day, but with no snow for those that might not be aware.
Have you ever evacuated?
We have never evacuated, but we had a couple bad ones. In 2004, there was a bad one that fortunately I was off the grid for a fish festival in Northern Vermont, which were the two worst fish shows I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah. The last fish shows? Those are terrible.
They were the end of the 2.0 fish era, and there were some substance abuse issues by one person in the band in particular. Shows. It was a mud pit up there, but flying in was something like I never thought I'd see before. And blue tarps over every roof, and Orlando got smacked. And fortunately, we were living in a high-rise condo building at the time that had power, but the amount of people that were shaving and basically taking showers in the bathroom of the office building was like 3 weeks long. And I don't think I need to tell people this, but no power in Florida in mid-August is no good.
I heard some sirens. Eliott's camera's off. The last I heard was he was at a Motel 6 somewhere in California. So there might be some details here.
I'm out at this conference, this reconvened conference. I spoke yesterday. It was great. Wonderful experience. Moses and his wife Simran put on a wonderful event. And but because I spoke, lots of people were coming up, being very kind and talking to me. And so I spent 12 to 15 hours yesterday talking. And so my voice is all up and I'm exhausted, and I'm staying at this Days Inn in Santa Monica because I was like, well, I should model good behavior for my team and not spend $1,000 a night on a hotel room. And so I'm staying at this place, and I woke up this morning and I checked to make sure I still had my kidneys. I do. And I met some folks in the elevator who seemed like, not pro-meth. Yeah, not like pro-meth, but also decidedly not anti-meth. And I was like, why am I here? The walls, I'm sure, are sticky. I haven't touched them yet. And all I thought was, as soon as I pulled into the hotel, I said to myself, I've got to make better decisions in the future. So
what's the name of this? What's the name of this hotel, Eliott, again?
Days in Santa Monica. It's something.
Well, we should be previewing that deal this week, but we're not.
And like, to be fair, I've stayed in far worse places, but the juxtaposition of this spot in beautiful Santa Monica, I'm like, man, just do better. So,
yeah.
Well, you might need to dust that wallet off next time.
Yeah, good, huh?
All right, so well, what else besides what's been going on besides reconvening? Who's the best person you met?
I met some wonderful people. I don't know that it's appropriate to sort of name drop, but I met some fantastic people who are doing some really big and interesting things, which I appreciate. Met a lot of folks who are sort of part of the Twitter real estate community, which is nice. And it's been great. But honestly, the past week has been consumed with, we're currently pursuing 4 separate portfolios. One's Section 8 that we've been working on, one's distressed debt, one's a collection of weird limited partner interests, and one is a low-income housing tax credit portfolio. And the odds are that you don't get any of them, because that's just how these things work. You pursue deals and they just don't happen. But there's this outside chance that we get all 4. And I think about that from time to time with just sort of like, I don't know, the same way people kind of like abuse. I kind of look at like what would happen and how insane could that get? So I want each one of them on their own, and I guess if we had all 4 of them come through, that'd be wonderful. But there's no like, oh well, we'll just pursue this opportunity. They're all interesting, and I might.
Does that transform the company, or do you have to, or can you handle it with your existing infrastructure? We'd have to level up if we got that many. It'd be another 35, 15. It'd be another 6,000 or 7,000 units. Yeah.
Do you need a buyer broker to represent you?
Yeah. I've always what I've always wanted is someone to walk into the property with me and say, oh, "Great bones, good basis play here."
Yeah. Let me tell you about the upside story here.
Yeah.
It's great.
I'm thrilled Lasky's on our pod, and I'm sorry I'm not on camera because I'm aimlessly wandering around this hotel room trying to get my together. But I will routinely pick on Ohio because it's entertaining. And we had one exchange where he said Columbus is like, what'd you say, Matt? You were like, Columbus is pretty not bad or something, or Columbus is halfway.
Look, it was like, it's above average. We are the second largest city in the Midwest, and we have some buildings like over 5 stories. So it's getting serious.
It was the most on brand, like quietly humble Midwest, and also like tepid endorsement of a place. He's like, I don't know, it's pretty good. It's like really selling me here, man. So
I can say these things as a Chicago born and raised kid with a place there. This is, just my mistress of a Midwest city.
Yeah.
Where in Chicago are you from, Matt?
Was born downtown on the Gold Coast and then grew up in Elmhurst.
Okay.
West suburb.
Hopefully you're not a White Sox fan. Sounds like you're a Cubs fan being from Gold Coast. All right.
Fit the stereotype.
All right, let's talk about a deal, Brett, instead of you just collecting fees here. Why don't you?
Well, Eliott wouldn't even hire me as the buyer broker. Like, that's so messed up, man. Golly, whatever, Eliott. All right, let's talk about it.
Fees.
Spin it up.
Whatever. I thought we were all on the same team here, but I guess not. All right, so this week we are going to be talking about, let's see what we're going to be talking about here. Let me try to pull this up. I didn't do a great job out of the gate here, so let me see if I can do a better
Matt,
job.
while Brett's pulling this up, can you just give like a quick overview of, I know you've looked at this deal.
Yeah.
What is this deal? What are the typical deals you're looking at? What's the typical execution for you guys? Like, he'll pull this up, but generally, what's your strategy and kind of investment thesis on these things?
Yeah, so we have kind of, in our healthcare side, I guess we invest out of 3 buckets. We've got like a core plus value add multi-tenant healthcare fund, a single tenant healthcare fund, and then we've done some like bigger one-off opportunistic or special situations type things. So this would definitely be, we're going to look at a building that's like 150,000 square feet, 67% occupied, and just kind of underwent a gen office to medical conversion. This would definitely be like in our special situations or maybe the end of a value add type fund, but probably like if we're pursuing this, it's probably like a one-off special situation type deal where we're looking to be real aggressive with our capital on like a 3 to 5 year period.
So is that like super high teens return? Just to nerd out here from a real estate perspective, I don't even know what that means, but it sounds cool.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you execute a business plan and if you bought this where we would want, we'd probably price our capital like at the LP side, high teens to low 20s, but like a double in 3 to 5 years type of base case. And by the way, I don't know if we can talk about it as we go. I mean, there's some aggressive capital in the space. I don't know if you win the deal here, but that's where we would probably look to take something like this down. I think others would. I think everyone's underwriting to relatively high returns, like the big boy institutions that might look at this are going to underwrite to a, call it high teens return of some sort. And then it's just, how aggressive do you get in your assumptions?
Give an overview of this, Brett. Give a description.
Sure. So we're talking about a medical office building in Arlington, Virginia, about just over 150,000 square feet, 67% occupied with a WALT, which I do know what that means, weighted average lease term, since I'm just a dumb multifamily guy. And it's a late 80s vintage deal, underwent almost $5 million renovation, which we'll probably dive into to see what that looks like. And I'm not sure, Matt can probably talk to the parking here, but just over two per thousand, which seems a little light, but that's above my pay grade. So, I think it's not listed. There's not a list price here, but looks like there's some good credit in some of the tenants where you've got, about 35% of the rent roll or the tenants are, kind of appear to be good credit.
Matt, Eliott always talks about with multifamily of having identifying the reason someone would want to live in a certain building.
Yep.
What's the demand driver? What is it in?
Yeah. So, I mean, proximity so most medical office investors are investing along the lines of like private pay insurance. So commercial insurance, which usually leads to people who are employed and or affluent, lead to, call it, better quality tenancy. I mean, there's a whole world in medical office that might be equivalent to like the Section 8 where you're getting into heavy Medicare, Medicaid type insurance. But if you think about medical and if it's private pay, I mean, you're almost like, not government credit, but your money is coming from insurers and or the government. So it's a little bit of a different reimbursement model. So a lot of the sophisticated medical owners are looking at payer mix, which is really just people's insurance breakdown in the area. Accessibility matters. So one of the biggest trends over the last 20 years has been a bunch of medical providers realized going to the hospital is a shitty experience and it's more expensive. So things are coming out of the hospital into the suburbs closer to the population when it's not, call it life or death, or you don't need to go to a hospital. Everything, they call that like outpatient medical. And so, more and more stuff is moving to the suburbs for patient care and then also kind of cost of delivery, of which this fits the bill. And then, it's not too unlike, call it bigger retail, right? Like what's the accessibility, and that's both from a higher level, like commute times, traffic times, and then how easy is it to get in and out of the property. Parking's a big thing, as Brett mentioned. There's certain buildings we've passed on because parking ratios were too tight, and you go visit and the building's 70% leased and the parking lot's 100% full. That's the first thing a tenant notices when they go to tour, right? They're like, hey, where the hell are you going to put our people? If we take down 20,000 square feet, that's going to be 50 to 100 spaces a day or at any time for us. So where are we going? So it does have some similarities to retail in terms of the sophisticated users are thinking about it as they're no longer like patients, they're customers now. And so what's a great customer experience for my kind of medical practice?
So if you're looking at a market, you sort of have two, not unlike retail, you've got two levels of customers. You've got your tenant and then you've got your tenant's customers. So you're saying that you want to be in a place where there's plenty of your target tenant customers, people that have some coin in their pocket enough to at least afford insurance.
Yep.
And then you want to have this a facility that appeals to the folks that are trying to attract those people. So what is it about, in broad strokes, about a medical office facility that makes sense besides parking? This one happens to be multi-story. Does that matter? Is that a benefit? Is that a negative? Is surface parking better than deck parking? What are those kind of things you're looking at?
Yeah, so a lot of that changes, and call it like the urban environment, right? And so Ballston is a great submarket in DC. We've actually done some work across the street in Ballston Quarter with medical users on the advisory side. Normally, flatter is better, but that's not a thing in the urban environment. But if you're out in true northern VA and suburbs, a building this tall starts to get difficult, but this is more of a product of, call it, infill or closer to an urban environment. Depending on who the tenants are, there is, co-tenant synergy based on referrals. So specialists in healthcare get a lot of their business from referral sources. So there is a, retail, or there's a healthcare version of merchandising mix of, can tenants refer to each other, and how does the whole ecosystem work? Usually in these bigger buildings that comes into play, but it depends on the tenants. And we can get into kind of the tenancy here, but there's also one of the most unique things about healthcare, I would say, is the hospital systems are highly political. So they have the market leading health system in here in Inova Health Systems, but you got to understand the local dynamics in every market, because a lot of these hospital systems are like the Bloods and the Crips, and they hate each other. And if you've got one
really
in it means it means the others aren't coming on that turf. So, and that's market by market, but the systems, are battling it out. And what you get in your best credit, most towns have, call it, 2 to 4 systems that are market leading, depending on, overall scope, if they have children's practices and whatnot. But they don't play nice together. So they all want to be in their own building. So you get Inova in a building like this, it's probably not going to get any other of the major systems, but that's where, you got to pound the pavement and talk to local leasing teams to really understand the dynamics and kind of how everyone plays together and what that rules out or what it might include.
I've got a friend who's a land use attorney who ran his entire firm with Inova as a client for a decade, fighting another hospital from entering the market. It's just incredible fees, salad days for a decade, going to war with another hospital trying to enter the market.
Yep.
So the U.S. medical system's in the for-profit business as well, if I'm hearing you guys correctly.
I mean, they label themselves a nonprofit, which is a good gig, but we've seen them make billions and then also get public funding for their corporate office. So it's a pretty good gig if you can get it.
That's one of the things that makes America great.
Yeah.
So if you're looking at this one, Matt, so this comes across your desk. Walk us through how you would get to at least a go or no go, or look deeper or not type decision.
Yeah. So we look at this kind of, first thing is Ballston. It's all right, that's interesting. Let's dig in deeper, right? So, my partner,
high income Northern Virginia market.
Exactly. So I'm the guilty, I'm the finance guy, and my partner's the real estate guy. I'm I see, 150,000 square feet, 60 some percent occupied. If we lease it up, we can make a pile. And he's can we actually look at the real estate first? So we're actually going to look, where is this positioned in the market? Where are the major arteries? How is it parked? What is the actual physical characteristics of the real estate? Some of the things that we can change, some of the things we can't change. I would say, this passes the test for what you said. DC has tailwinds. Ballston is a good submarket in DC. Okay, let's dig in further. And in medical, that right there alleviates a lot. I would say the value add side for us in medical has a very small Venn diagram of things that have occupancy issues that we actually think we can cure, right? So there's a ton of vacant, defunct hospitals. We don't know what to do with that. That's just a hard pass. That's too big of a heavy lift. So something like this, they've put some money back into, but there's not insane functional obsolescence, which is good. So we're looking at this. We're going to look at the floor plans. So in healthcare, because of the back office cost structure to operate healthcare practices these days, there's an insane consolidation. It's basically like you're going to join a market leading practice or you're going to join a health system, but you have to have some buying power on the back office to be, profitable in this business. There's a insane amount of shrinkage of your one-off or like 5 to 10 doctor primary care practices, family practices, et cetera. They need to affiliate with larger groups, which means larger floor plans. So like dead are the days, I think, of a lot of like 2,000 or 3,000 square feet suites. Like suite size is big, and because of systems and larger practices, floor plates are growing, which is a good thing as a landlord, but something we're like hypercritical of. We've passed on a number of deals where, it was a 3-story building with like 5,000 square foot floor plates. That's just tough. Kind of where we think healthcare is going.
So that needs to be, in your mind, what, 10,000, 20,000?
I don't know if we have a hard rule. Some of that's going to vary by market. Something like DC where there's insanely dense population and some bigger practices, I'd say bigger is better. But if we're going out in the suburbs and it's a 2-story building, it's like 8 to 10,000 a floor. We can probably get comfortable with it.
The moat in medical office is also part of the drag on it is these things take a lot of money to build out. What would you imagine if you had vacant space in this building? I guess it's already been medical office, but what are you spending, or would you imagine that you'd spend on a per square foot basis to turn these spaces?
Yeah, depending on kind of current condition as a landlord here, I would say, and if you're getting 7 or 10 year lease terms, you're probably every bit of 75 to 150 a foot. And you cut out there a little bit in the middle, but I think where we're going, like the upshot of medical tenants they're sticky and relocation costs are high, but the downside is the landlord participates in that. It's capital intensive business. So here we're probably underwriting 100 to 150 a foot, depending on existing suite condition for all new deals in the lease up phase. And our strategy.
You've got leasing commissions on top of that too, right? For the
dumb
that's
brokers
just want to get paid here. Yeah, that's just TI.
Exactly. Yeah.
So these dumb brokers want to get paid, which is their
Brett's
real
over
pain.
there going, in Brett's mind, it's like blah, 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 blah. Wait, there's commissions in this deal.
Well, no. But to Matt's point, and he mentioned it, I mean, the office business by nature and retail too are just capital intensive from, and you could probably, Matt, correct me if I'm wrong, you could probably have some tenants here that require a higher TI budget just based on specialty of care, if they're doing procedures in there, blah, 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 blah.
Yep. Yeah, I'd say, in a normal market, like not extreme coastal, so take LA, New York City out of this, but like, a normal medical office market for your standard doctor's office from like a warm shell, that tenant is probably spending every bit of $200 to $300 a foot internally. To get it to just like a non-surgical, normal, run-of-the-mill like doctor's office. So think like primary care or derm. And the landlord's going to probably participate in a healthy chunk of that, but it's costly.
Right. Well, just flipping through the stacking plans here, we got to the 6th floor, and I find it very interesting that they have a large shared balcony right next to a pain management clinic. So we're going to fill your prescription of some heavy hitting narcotics, and we'll let you enjoy them on the balcony. Just don't fall over.
Right. Yeah. The don't jump balcony is going to be great insurance.
I wonder how the caged in look from an aesthetic perspective would work there.
What? Okay. So we've got it feels like the square footage of this thing works on a floor plate basis.
It's about 20,000, it looks like.
So in a lot of cases, the first floor is the most desirable floor in medical because you're dealing with sick people and or patients, right? So that's occupied. But to the extreme inverse on this deal, the whole top floor is vacant, which to me just screams of, you could do something cool with one user. They're going to probably want building signage like you see on one of the earliest pages that we were on, like Virginia Hart had some building signage. If you can get a full floor guy, you probably want to be able to dangle building signage. like that Virginia Heart, if you can put something up top above that, that probably helps, right? Especially in a splashier market like Boston, where there's a lot of mid-rise buildings. But to me, the whole thing would be, talking to local leasing people and, can we bite off a tenant, like who's in the market that might want that whole floor and some building branding, which I'd start with Inova, because if you brand a building that the hospital's the anchor tenant in without the hospital, that's poking a bear and maybe short-sighted. So it starts with the hospital user and trying to get aggressive. I mean, when we've done value add stuff and someone's interested in already a tenant, I mean, your best tenants in medical are the ones already in your building because everyone's growing. For like a lot of the businesses have like healthy underlying fundamentals, and unlike retail, in some cases, a lot of these guys can just out earn a problem by working more because the margins are huge. So it's just, hey, stay open longer, see more patients. Sorry, dentist, but you have to work 4 days a week now instead of 2. But trying to
that sounds like a real pain in the rear
building.
end.
I know.
Yeah, that sounds like, speaking of dentists, we got this sweet dental chair here, I think, with the nice metal plate next to it, which I'm sure somebody's teeth are going on after that procedure.
Are there any specific tenants that when you're looking through these that are better or worse, or does that matter? Like, is dentist better than pain management, or?
Yeah, that's a great question. You want to, Brett, go back to that last slide and we can run through it. So like I look at Inova Healthcare and I think sports medicine and PT are great clients, but in terms of build out on interior, they're the least sticky because most of the time they have the least amount of like investment in the space because it's open rooms, right, for PT and stuff. So they're not plumbed, or there's not a bunch of exam rooms. There's no surgery, x-rays, imaging, etc. Flip side of that, like vascular care and cardiovascular, insanely kind of high levels of build out in a lot of those. Then we get to the next two. So pain management, addiction treatment, depending on the who and exactly what's going on. So one of the questions a lot for both of those tenants are you dispersing or dispensing any sort of stuff on site? And if you are, doing some pills on site, what is it? And, keeping a high image building, which I think you need to do in this type of like this submarket with, call it cardiovascular surgery center and a market leading health system. Like you got to be sensitive to the experience and kind of how the addiction treatment and rehab and pain management tenants fit into your ecosystem. Some are a lot better than others, but I mean, there's straight up tenants that won't go in a building and co-locate with, certain types of addiction treatment and rehab or pain management just because that's not their image. And so if you're going to be top of market rents, which this building is, you got to be sensitive, call it, to that tenant mix. So the most desirable, so like dental's failure rate nationally is like below 1%. So dentists are around forever. They don't do a ton for your building other than pay rent, which is great. The best referral sources would be like market leading primary care or pediatrics, but not affiliated with a system, right? So if they're system affiliated, they're going to refer to themselves, and that might help kind of grow the system's presence in the building. But in most, call it, most large MSAs have a primary care group and a pediatrics group that's not affiliated with one of the hospital systems and is like the largest in town outside anything system related. And that's the money maker for all the specialists, because if a specialist has a referral source from the primary care doc or the pediatric doc, right? If you think about your healthcare experience, you need to go get something done. You usually start or have to get a referral from, your peds, or if it's your kids, or your primary care doc. So building that ecosystem around those tenants is kind of, that would be ideal.
Paying attention here, Matt, just to demonstrate I am paying attention, the synergies between tenants was something you mentioned. Does anyone find it very interesting that the pain management group and the addiction treatment rehab groups are listed like on top of each other? I mean, that's like a pure synergy here. When we give you too many painkillers, you can go to the addiction treatment and rehab center. Yeah, you don't even need to leave the building. When you get out of rehab, just come back and see us, and we'll get you to whatever you need again, and then you can go back to the rehab facility.
Yeah, that floor pays for itself. It's not going anywhere.
It's like the prison system in America. Just you go over there and you'll be back here in 30 days.
Okay, so we got, if you're looking at this, you pull up this sort of tenancy overview. Does this strike you as good, interesting, something that you'd steer clear of?
So I would say it's okay. As I look through this, I like that the hospital's there. I don't love that a large portion of it appears to be sports medicine and PT. Obviously, those two go hand in hand, are great together. But it would start with talking, to either the brokers in the market or the system about do they have, call it, any other plans? And as you go through it, in the rent roll, there are certain large tenants that have termination rights. So that Walt on the front page to me is a sucker's Walt. It's the broker Walt that. Sorry.
Wait,
Brett,
are you insinuating that you don't take everything as gospel in these OMs, Matt?
I did that once and I learned the hard way. That was the last piece of fiction I read, and now I'm more of a realist.
No, fair enough. Comic books. These OMs are essentially.
That's right.
Books,
yeah, I like the pictures.
Yeah. Two other highlights on this. One was proximity to hospital. Talk about that, and then amenities like retail, restaurants, that sort of thing. How big of a role do those play for you?
Yeah, so a lot of it's a war for talent on the healthcare opco side, right? So practicing in a cool area or a nice office is a recruiting tool for one of your clients being your tenants, and not their. I mean, patients. Yes, it's nice to depending on what you're doing, be in a good area, but especially for the staff and your talent that makes the business go. Having desirable amenities is great. Leads to a better work environment and, can help recruiting with all else equal. The proximity to a hospital, I, as an investor, think it's interesting. They highlight rival health systems. So that's, not your anchor tenant's hospital. That would be more interesting if this becomes a big outpatient post, right? So if in Arlington Medical Center, it was a VHC Health anchor tenant, I think that's more interesting, saying, hey, this is near our campus. But then the proximity to campus matters for, VHC Health practices or specialists that, may do some work there. Now, the next question is talking to the brokers of, hey, will VHC ever, co-locate with Inova? If they say no, then it's like, that's great. We're close to it. Maybe there's some outliers there who have some strategic reason of being close that aren't affiliated with, VHC, but, somehow do some referral work or perform some surgeries on campus. But it's.
And is that close? Is 1.2 miles close? Like 1.2 miles in, let's say, student housing is a lifetime away.
Yeah.
In medical office, does that work?
It's not bad. So it's not on campus or campus adjacent, right? Campus adjacent basically means if you stand on the roof, if you can see it. Brett's team's going to call it campus adjacent.
Oh, absolutely. And we also would have said yes to another provider co-locating here. Does a broker ever say no?
But also,
I'm not aware of one.
1.2 miles isn't bad. It's not great, right? Like walkable would be ideal, but 1.2 miles isn't horrible, especially for kind of the density of hospitals and houses in DC. So like 1.2 miles in DC, I would say is pretty good.
Okay, so we talked about it with your investor hat on. Let's just say you were, part of your business might be representing a user for a building like this.
Yep.
Advising them. What are the things? Are there any things that you haven't mentioned? Let's just say you were representing the largest children's pediatric group in Northern Virginia.
Yep.
This was on your tour list. What are the things that you would say to them about it?
I think we're going to dig into the parking relative to the comp set, right? So that is, I'd say suburban medical office, ideal world, you want 5 spaces per 1,000. Tighter markets, 3 is pretty good, especially when there's a surgical component. I would guess that this, once this gets to 80 or 90% leased, I think you start to have on-site parking problems based on, they showed a expansion parking lot thing. I looked through some of the parking data. So one of the other things to dig in here, right now, a third of this NOI comes from parking lot revenue, less expenses, plus their antennas. So you're not just in the medical office game here, you're also in the parking management game, or paying a parking manager and then also negotiating antennas, or you could very quickly get above or below water. I mean, that could be an opportunity, but it could also be like a major risk. There's over $1 million right now of parking revenue, which I'm presuming is largely driven by the building, not people visiting the area. But as a tenant, okay, so it's parking costs, structure, what we can get. If it's like the largest PEDS group in the area, we're definitely going to be talking about building signage and how much like square footage we can get. The majority of my world and the investors in our world are buying triple net leases. So another knock on this is you've got full service gross leases with stops. That's, I think, on some of the institutions, it's going to be a hard no unless they really love DC. But if you look at like some of the big boy REIT reports, I mean, they're just knocking against they're telling the street all the time, hey, we've got triple net leases, like we're protected against inflation and cost increases. So that's kind of reeks of, older vintage conversion. Every new building today in medical office is, basically a triple net lease.
How big of a thing I do notice when I go to a medical office building that the parking is staggeringly expensive as a rule. Is that sort of this profit center for building owners? And does that make a building less desirable? Or does it not affect, if you had a restaurant tenant, for example, you would need to comp. The landlords would typically be comping parking. How does that work?
So market by market, some do. Some of the buildings we know of, like in the urban core, the city is owning the garage and the building's on top of it. So it's and I think as an investor, that's a dangerous game. I don't know if, we don't want to buy a building and not be in control of our parking. We've passed on a couple buildings for that explicitly. But as a tenant, if I put my tenant's hat on.
Yeah, maybe you're getting to what I was just going to ask, Matt. Sorry to interrupt you there.
Yeah, if I put my tenant hat on, we're definitely going to comp all the parking. And a lot of, I think, owners in this area would probably, if they think they have an edge, differentiate based on either free parking or less costly parking, because that's a real cost of occupancy in these urban markets. Certain practices we know will eat the parking, and they'll pay the landlord, but they won't let their tenants pay, so they'll validate their tenants parking. So there's a couple levels to this, Eric, like you're asking, right? Like retail landlords are probably going to validate the parking. A lot of, call it, healthcare tenants will validate the parking, so that becomes a big kind of decision factor of, if I have to validate 50% less parking, and that's a couple $100K a year line item, that's coming in to factor into the cost of occupancy and where we may look.
And then another thing that we see maybe in the Southeast is maybe Orlando specifically is a lot of reserve parking in these heavy medical use. So that's just, you're paying for parking one way or another, reserved or validation or some combination of all the above.
Yeah, I would say in a lot of markets, like in your traditional suburban medical office market, like you would see out in Orlando, right? So if you're like in a Winter Park or a Lake Mary, free park or reserve parking is something either upfront you want for tenants, which just becomes the same shit show it would be in retail of that's tough to give away. But a lot of it is for doctors in back. That becomes a good recruiting tool for both tenants, like landlords to use for tenants, and then the tenants to use for doctors of, hey, you at least know, your orthopedic surgeon that has, his head can barely fit in a room because they're just shy of God in what they can do. He gets to, drive his Bentley, park in the same spot every day, go make a bunch of revenue and then, walk home or walk back to his car and go home. So it's when used properly, a pretty cheap bargaining tool for landlords to, court bigger tenants to say, hey, I'll give, you're whatever, a 3 surgeon practice. Like I'll give you 5 or 6 spots so your surgeons and a couple of your like big staff can have reserved parking.
Well, maybe you could throw in a Bentley for one of the doctors too as like an incentive.
Right.
I mean, there's no shortage of egos in the doctor space, I don't think.
That's right.
All right. Well, let's bring it home here.
Well, one final question here, Matt, and this I think kind of parallels into multifamily. What do you think about the finished ceiling heights of 8.6? That seems to go back to the term of functional obsolescence.
Yeah, that's low, right? I mean, they're building them bigger and airier these days. That would be one where it's like, we're a little bit of a tourist in DC, right? We're not doing a ton there, but that's one where I would want to look at the whole comp set and just be like, how inline or out of line is this? If it's, most of the stuff is 8.6 to like 9 feet, I probably get comfortable. But if, some of the comp set that they showed is, we're pushing high market rents and they have 10-foot ceilings and some on-site parking, I think that starts to become, a risky proposition because we're certainly not raising the ceiling. I mean, that's not going to ever be economically feasible in kind of today's capital market.
That's just something you can't fix.
So summarize it. We've got an older building in a relatively dense, high income, top tier market. A little bit of functional obsolescence, or at least sniffing at functional obsolescence. Some opportunity in lease up, which could also be evidence of challenging in leasing. What sort of, let's just keep it high level at a cap rate where on this, is there one where you're a buyer, and what is that?
Yeah, on this, we're probably passing just because we know enough to know that we're probably not going to be the smartest buyer. And if we win it, it might not be a win. I think your most likely buyer here is going to be somebody with like real capital and local ties that knows the health system or the players and already identified a lot of those questions of like, they just happen to be, or their spouse or great granddad's on the board at Inova, and you can play some inside baseball there. But like, to me, like, I think it's an interesting proposition. I just think it's in an institutional enough market that the best buyer for this isn't going to be us. It's going to be somebody with deep ties to a couple of the systems and market leading practices that are already there. Because if you think you can lease it up, the deal is going to pencil, right? So it really becomes, what's your quality of execution? And I just don't think, we've operated in 40 plus markets, but this is a big enough deal with the current NOI that it's going to get a lot of sophisticated players there. And some of those guys are going to know the health systems and major players and not be starting from, close to zero like we are.
Well, it looks like the broker pro forma, which again is gospel here, the NOI goes from about 3.7 to 6.3 in year 5. So what's that, a 70% increase in NOI? Shouldn't be a problem from my perspective.
Absolutely. And, Brookfield is just leaving those crumbs out there for the next guy to go make tens of millions of dollars. It's right. Basically philanthropy at this point.
Right.
Yeah.
So what's the cap rate in your estimation for some of the maybe more sophisticated capital or the inside baseball for people? Is this like a 7.5 cap? Is this like a
this is going to trade? This is going to trade with a 6 handle, maybe a 5. Yeah.
And on the 6.2 or like on the in place?
On the in place.
Okay.
This is a little bit, it might get more aggressive than that just because, the right guy is going to throw probably IO debt on here or lower leverage. But it's really going to be like what you can build to. And I think someone's going to underwrite this into call it 7s, somewhere in the 7s yield on cost. And, they're going to pro forma an exit, plus or minus 50 bips of 6 cap, depending on where they, if they're underwriting interest rates kind of falling and a return to normal. And that spread for a value add deal is huge, right? That's going to pencil on anyone's 3 to 5 year hold. And, it comes down to execution. But I think you can get to that 7s number by leasing that top floor and a little bit more. So
at
it's
achievable. At a $3.7 million NOI at a 6.5 cap, which I was, again, you mentioned a 6. That's like $57 million. So that's like $380 a square foot. And granted, this is not, this is arguably irreplaceable real estate. But I mean, what does it cost you to build this at the end of the day? 150,000 square foot, 6-story.
I don't even know what the verticality or land price in there, but like we're out in the burbs in Midwest markets building for our all-in costs are $400 to $500 a foot, right? So that basis is incredible.
Discount to replacement.
It is. So I think someone does well with this, and it's worth noting in the world of healthcare. 6 years ago, like REITs would do $10 million deals. That was a big deal. They've inched up a little bit. They're like 20 to 30, but this isn't the office world. Like a $50 million trade is a big trade. So like any of the sophisticated capital in medical are going to be interested in this because there's not a lot of compelling value add at this scale. Like $100 million medical deal is still like, that's your closer to $1 billion like Manhattan office trade than it is like small potatoes. So there's just not a lot of, high, call it tens of millions of dollars or, 6-figure or 9-figure transactions that go around. And so that's going to draw a lot of interest, I think, between DC. It's going to, trade probably at a discount to replacement cost with like a real value add story if you think you can execute.
So this is a good deal for somebody, not for Matt. And if it's not a good deal for Matt, it's not a good deal for me. Where do you fall, Brett?
No, I'm Matt, and I just met at the beginning of this podcast. I'm with him.
I'm with that guy.
Yeah,
we go back.
Yeah, way back to like 60 minutes ago. But Matt clearly knows what he's talking about. I don't. Other than I did believe the broker pro forma. That's the only thing Matt and I disagree on.
I would say though, if I had my, allocator hat on, I'm sitting as a multi-million-dollar LP with the right GP, I would probably dig in hard to this. I don't think we're the right GP for this, but as an LP, depending on the who and how convinced I am with their local ties, that could be interesting.
Yeah, it seems like a sweet one. If you're that buyer, and there's probably just a small handful of local sharpshooters that could pull this off.
There happened to be a couple that just inked 9-figure JVs with some of the big boys that are headquartered in DC. So if I was a betting man, they're heavy money line to be the one taking this down.
That's where it goes.
Maybe the new owner of the Baltimore Orioles, is that who you might be referring to?
Maybe.
Yeah, maybe. Asking for a friend.
Right, hypothetically.
Not me. I don't have a problem, but let's just say my friend had this problem. What would you tell him?
All right, gents. Let's leave it there.
Unfortunately, Matt, we have this closing bell for deals that we're going to buy on this podcast, but we don't get to ring it on this one. We'll be Elliott's proxy. He's out too.
Set it down softly.
I did no noise.
There is no bell.
I think for Elliott's benefit too, quickly, since he's not here to defend himself, this is where Eliott was staying. That, my friends, is what you want to be, is what you call being a good steward to the corporate dollar.
Wow.
I can't believe he would Google that and think that's a good idea.
No. He's a smart dude, too. He's a smart dude. And I don't know, man. I'm going to love to talk to him on a future episode about his decision-making here.
Excellent.
All right.
Did we
do it? All right, cool.
All right.